It's Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are at the California Republican Party Convention in the Bay Area, and we are joined by Jim Nielsen. Of course, he is a state senator representing significant portions of Northern California. I should say North State.
The North State.
Because when people talk about Northern California, they think San Francisco. But I learned that from San Francisco to Crescent City, which is kind of at the top, 7 hours.
That's right.
And that's all Jim Nielsen territory.
I've represented 19 different Northern California counties over the years.
Let's talk about some of those counties. I have been, they are just beautiful. Been to Redding with the beautiful Lake Shasta. And so it brings up the question about Lake Shasta, Folsom, Oroville. When I was there in the end of 2014, Lake Shasta looked lunar.
It was a lunar landscape.
It was a lunar landscape. Today, sir, it's full.
Well, we're almost full. It's over 86%.
Right.
And had we now had Sites Reservoir built, we'd have almost 400,000 acre feet of water stored for the future.
So let's talk about both sites as well as Temperance Flat. We know that the voters in 2014 were quite generous, and they passed Proposition 1. And that was the bond that was going to provide $7.545 billion, $2.7 billion for storage. Sir, it's been, 18 months? Where's the construction?
Well, you know, everything takes a lot of time in California.
Come on.
The Water Commission is now working hard on the regulations.
Right.
To decide, then they make the decision of the beneficial use. And we are assured that they're going to have those regulations completed by the end of the year.
Is the issue the over-regulation, the regulatory environment in California that's causing, I'll call it, delays in construction on these new above-ground projects, or is it just takes time? Or both?
Well, no, regulation affects everything.
Right.
Everything. And it's affected this as well.
But I would have thought, given that Prop 1 was a bipartisan agreement, couldn't it have been written in such a way that once it passes, we're ready to go, or is that just wishful thinking?
Well, it is wishful thinking because you have to get it through a bipartisan legislature, and you have to have the support of the governor.
Right.
And there are certain sensitivities, shall I say, about these kinds of regulatory issues.
Okay.
But we've done very well with it, to be honest with you. And I have had a lot of meetings at the highest levels recently.
Right.
And I'm quite sure that things are moving expeditiously at this point. We are going to have to be very vigilant to ensure that, though, that these regulations come out, that the public knows what's going on and has the chance to input these regulations, and that the commission makes those decisions. And that $2.7 billion was presented to the voters for surface storage, large surface storage. We cannot conserve our way into the future for our grandchildren.
Who would have thunk when you were in the Senate in the 70s and 80s that Democrats would agree to surface storage projects?
Well, I had hopes even then and was working for it, but it's happened. But now it is the job of the legislature, the administration, and that includes the commission, to keep faith with the voters.
So let's talk about what's happening though right now, because you said it, the reservoirs are filling up in Northern California. We had all high hopes of an El Nino in Southern California, went to Northern California. And so there's a bit of frustration, I understand, in Northern California because we still have these very strong restrictions in place. The governor's still looking for 25% conservation, and Northern Californians, North Staters, are saying, well, wait a second, our reservoirs are almost full. We're having to actually release water to avoid spillage. And so, you know, where do you go with that, sir?
Well, any of the communities that are having to still hit these very high targets of conservation are concerned about that, and they're inputting and they're saying to the water board, hey, wait, what's the matter? It's better times. And the board's taking a little hard stand on it right now.
It seems as if they're starting to move a little bit. I mean, they did adjust some targets, but do we really need to look at region by region in terms of conservation goals?
I think, of course we do. Instead of a statewide, one conservation target fits all, of course, that is not the way to look at it. Everything is a little bit different region by region. And some areas have done a very good job of conservation and others have not. So indeed we have to look at it.
I want to get a sense from you about this convention. You have been to, I don't know, how many conventions?
Oh, I couldn't even count them.
Give me a sense of what's the tone, the tenor of the convention. You know, we walked in yesterday, there were some protesters, it got a little heated. What's your feeling?
The word to describe the Republican attitude at conventions, plural, and this one for sure, motivated.
Really?
And the little bit of silliness of yesterday,
right.
And I guess when you're getting to the point of violence perpetrated by those individuals, that's a little beyond silliness. It's reprehensible. But it motivates the Republican base all the more.
So let's talk, though. I want to make a presumption that Donald Trump is the nominee. What do you think about how he plays? Because I could think of an argument where he drives up voter turnout like we've never seen. But is he driving out more supporters or more detractors?
Well, there's no question he's driven up supporters. And that is not just a narrow base. You look across the nation, he's brought out more Republican primary voters
right.
than anyone in history. And I think that's going to continue. That base has stayed stable and solid along the way and grown.
How do you feel as if he'll play in California, though? Generally and in North State?
On the North State, he'll do very well. And he's shown strong in California. The general election, and we'll see how it turns out. I mean, it's not over till it's over.
Of course.
And I've taken no position at
right.
this point. I had two other candidates that I
right.
was the chairman for, and they didn't work
they
out.
They didn't work out, right.
But that said,
Mr. Walker, Mr. Rubio.
Walker and Rubio.
Right.
But where we're at now is, I think that it's going to be a very competitive general election. And I feel I'm looking forward to that competitive general election.
What about here in California? Again, I think the electoral map arguably is, who knows what's going to be competitive. I mean, Pennsylvania, traditionally a Democratic state, but hey, he could bring out white collar or working class Democrats. It could be the Trump Democrats, like the Reagan Democrats.
That's right.
You know, but then in Georgia, does he motivate those that are more in favor of Hillary Clinton because of his rhetoric regarding immigration, for example?
Well, there's got to be an assumption that, you know, there's a negative Trump factor. Well, guess what? There's a huge negative Hillary Clinton factor.
Which you bring up a very interesting point. I mean, these are two candidates, whatever you may think of them, that have high negatives.
They do.
They have high
and
negatives.
This is controlled by another factor, and that is the state of affairs in the United States of America. The American people are uncomfortable. They feel unsafe.
Why?
They are not happy.
Why?
Because we are not safe. Because the economy has languished for 8 years.
But it's getting better. I mean, we're heading on the right trajectory.
Well, if you call this a trajectory, I don't think so.
And I understand North State is having some issues.
Not just the North State, all over California, all over America.
Right.
People are languishing. It has not gotten better for 8 years. While we as a country are at greater risk than I would argue in our lifetimes, the generations alive now,
right.
We've never been more at risk, and not external at risk. We're internally at risk. We have our enemies among us ready to create havoc, like San Bernardino. They're in all of our cities this very day. We are ill at ease, and those voters are going to look to leadership who can stand up and make us strong, not weak.
His name is Jim Nielsen, member of the California State Senate. We're at the California Republican Convention. My name is Brad Pomerance, Charter Local Edition.